Today we're doing a deep down dive into a Canadian Border Services Agency audit and our own exclusive Freedom of Information documents that detail the failures of the Canadian government to effectively screen Syrian refugees. Today I'm going to tell you about some specific cases of fake or questionable refugees just being allowed into Canada. An internal audit done by the CBSA detailed security gaps and failures in the Syrian refugee screening process. That audit was heavily redacted, but a full version was eventually leaked to the mainstream media. And the mainstream media, in turn, devoted a few one-page stories to it. But here at The Rebel, we decided that this issue deserved a much closer look. We filed our own access to information request for even more information. And we also got access to that non-redacted version of the audit. Now, this week already, I've shown you the number of times that the government failed to screen those refugees. And today I'm going to show you what some of those specific missed screenings really looked like. In this Access to Information document, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada says that they examined 100 files to confirm that every applicant met the criteria to become a refugee to Canada. Now, according to the document, this included determining if the applicant was one, Syrian, if the applicant had fled Syria, and lastly, determining if the applicant had no other durable solution other than resettling in Canada. According to the IRCC, they found that 100% of the cases met the criteria. But further on in the document, the IRCC notes that a number of cases, the applicants had returned to Syria on one or more occasions. This appeared to signal a situation where these individuals should have been deemed ineligible based on the criteria. Instead, immigration and refugee officials said that for Operation Syrian Refugee, a decision was then made to not universally apply this principle. So it was special treatment for the Syrian refugees. These refugees who claimed to be in immediate danger were going back to Syria on one or multiple occasions for visits. They kind of felt that they were in that much danger. And how in the heck can a government-sponsored refugee who claims to have nothing but the clothes on their back afford to take multiple trips back to Syria? Now let me tell you a story of one Syrian refugee that I found. The information is heavily redacted, but what the government left behind is enough to put together a tale of an unbelievably low criteria to qualify as a refugee to Canada. This so-called refugee that I found suffered, I guess, inconvenience. Now, this has been heavily redacted, but we can sort of put together what happened here. The principal applicant and his family, a spouse and 5 children with the ages redacted, fled Syria when the living conditions became untenable and then this is weird because it's pretty clear they've redacted his employment as a driver. Anyway, the principal applicant had to pass through 10 to 15 checkpoints when transporting passengers. So as far as we know, he fled to Jordan because of the inconvenience the war was creating with his job as a driver. The principal applicant fled to Jordan first to find accommodations for the family. The wife was pregnant and remained with the children back in Syria. So things were so bad in Syria for his family that he left his pregnant wife and children behind there. What happened to women and children first? Now, the refugee does claim that the neighborhood where he lived in Syria was subject to shootings and explosions, but that was during the time the principal applicant, the husband, was away. They say the security situation deteriorated. So it deteriorated after he left his pregnant wife behind and fled to Jordan without her. When the rest of the family finally got to Jordan, the principal applicant's sons were verbally harassed by students and teachers at a school, and one of the sons' arms was broken by several local students. The family say they also faced ongoing verbal harassment from their neighbors in Jordan. Now, this is terrible, I'll admit, but schoolyard fights, bullying, and bad neighbors do not make you a refugee, especially if you're in Jordan. Now, I found one instance of a refugee applicant who participated in demonstrations and said he was an honorary member of a group that was organizing the demonstrations. Now, the documents on file indicated the applicant himself was never armed. Now, that's according to the self-reporting of the applicant. But there is a reference on file to the protesters arming themselves, and the group of which the applicant was a so-called honorary member coordinating the arming of the protesters. The rules are you can't become a refugee if you are part of a militia or other non-government armed group or involved in those armed groups. And then there was another less serious case of an applicant who was asked by Syrian rebels to write slogans on cardboard, and sometimes he was given money in exchange for his services. Again, that is involvement in armed groups, making him ineligible. And this next fake Syrian refugee was actually neither a refugee nor Syrian, which clearly doesn't line up with what Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada is claiming to be a 100% compliance rate with that requirement to be Syrian. Just look at how unbelievable this is here. In most cases, it was apparent that refugees had no durable solution other than to be coming to Canada as a refugee. However, in 2 cases in our sample, it was unclear why these 2 cases were not refused on durable solution criteria. For one example, one applicant appeared to be a Lebanese citizen, as both he and his parents were born in Lebanon, but it was unclear if this potential durable solution possibility had been considered by the interviewing officer. The Internal Audit and Accountability Board note said it was unlikely an officer in the short Operation Syrian refugee processing time used would have been aware of issues such as different country citizenship laws, which would have been essential in determining whether or not refugees had durable solutions outside of Canada. How on earth did that guy walk into a refugee intake office in Lebanon, claim to be a Syrian refugee, and then just end up in Canada as one? Well, I can tell you exactly how that happened right here on this page. It says that Canada was receiving UNHCR-referred Syrian refugees that were reviewed by the Danish Refugee Council in Lebanon. And when the Canadian government audited 100 cases that were reviewed and approved by the Danish Refugee Council in Beirut, only 59 cases actually met the criteria to become a Syrian refugee. If this Lebanese guy could claim to be a Syrian refugee with actual documents to prove he's a citizen of Lebanon, then it would be really easy for someone with no documents who happen to be a member of ISIS to find their way into Canada by telling some sob story to an inept UN worker who is only doing their job less than 60% of the time. A 59% success rate is pretty terrible considering these are the people tasked with weeding out jihadis from the actual desperate refugees. Now, these are just a few cases discovered in a small random sampling of Syrian refugees. Tomorrow, I'm going to bring you the story of the obnoxious government's response to the problems in the Syrian refugee screening process. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. At The Rebel, we just reached 1 million YouTube subscribers. It's a great accomplishment thanks to all of you, but it also puts us on the radar of Silicon Valley, who seem to have a real hate-on for us conservatives. But we've got an answer to that problem. We've developed our own Rebel Media mobile app. You can get it on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Download it, give it a whirl, and take the other side of the story with you wherever you go.